We'll go ahead and call the Stationary Resource Committee meeting to order and get right into the first item, our Rule 1111.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There we go. Okay, if we could bring the slides up, please.
It's coming up.
All right, so thank you very much. What we want to do today is come to you and kind of give a little bit of background and then why we're coming back to Rule 111 one more time for to the Governing Board. As you'll recall, back on March 2nd, we adopted amendments to Rule 1111, focusing on extending and increasing the mitigation fee for units that were certified to meet the 14 nanograms per unit NOx emissions limit. At that time, as part of the board discussion during the approval of the proposed rule amendment, the Governing Board directed us to come back with some kind of labeling or other provisions that we could then inform the consumers about not only the fact that there are products that are being sold that do not meet the current Rule 1111 14 nanograms per joule emission limit, but also ensure that the public knows that there are products available out there that can be applicable to a rebate program. So we want to be able to look at what are the ways that we can do that outreach, how can we communicate to the consumer about that information. Companion to that was back in May, we had gotten the Governing Board approval for a rebate program. The contract has been executed. We're currently working on that, and I'll have a little bit more to say about the rebate program development in just a minute. When it comes to our labeling provisions, we've got a kind of a two-pronged approach. One is want to make sure that the Governing Board is aware, the committee members are aware, that we currently have labeling requirements in Rule 1111 now. So the labels that are on there indicate that the furnace manufacturers are utilizing the current mitigation fee program and that their units are not meeting the 14 nanograms per joule certification limit. What we want to do is we want to be able to build on those existing labeling requirements so that they have to do a modification. So what we're looking at is we have the furnace that is subject to the mitigation fee, and we also want to be able to inform the consumers that those non-compliant units are not eligible for the rebate program. Right now we have the labels that are being put on the furnace and the shipping, the furnace itself and the shipping box. So we're talking about augmenting those labels. But one of the other elements, and I'll talk about that in a moment, what we've been hearing from manufacturers, is that there's other ways that we can inform the consumers. So some of that may be through consumer brochures when they sit down at the kitchen table, as we had heard of at the last meeting, looking at the technical specification sheets. And then also the manufacturers can utilize their websites to inform consumers about their products. One of the things I do want to point out is we do have a provision as a part of our proposal that you had seen previously, that there's an element that they can submit for an alternative labeling language to be put on the furnace and on the box. The main reason for that is not only do we have a 14 gram per joule limit, but San Joaquin Valley also does. And other air districts may adopt that in the future. So they could actually come up with label language, submit that to us for approval that would be suitable not only for us, but for other air districts. And San Joaquin Valley is currently looking at adopting essentially our same fee structure that we did back in March. They're going to be setting their 30-day documents here, I believe on the 22nd for a June 21st public hearing in their jurisdiction. So we believe that when adding these labels and adding this information, we'll be able to better inform the consumer about the availability of compliant products. So, but the input that we heard, and we heard it when we had set the hearing or tried to set the hearing before, that the manufacturers are concerned that we're not really able to get the information out there, that it really happens at, like you say, at the kitchen table. That when consumers buy the furnaces, that they don't necessarily see the furnace or the box themselves. And a lot of times they may not see it after it's installed because some of those may be in an attic or in a closet. So we want to be able to look at these brochures and this other literature as a way to inform the consumer and incorporate those provisions to display that labeling in those different needs.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, I don't know how average I am, but I feel pretty average when it comes to, you know, if I had a furnace installed, I think if anybody had a furnace installed, both as a guy who owns apartment units and I have a home, you know, 3 grown kids, a wife. So what's the practical way most people would get something done if they're not going down to Home Depot? You know, I put my own water heater in, so you can do that route. But if you're gonna have your furnace replaced because of gas lines, most people aren't gonna self-help. do we have any reason to believe that 99.99% of consumers actually gets the booklet that comes with fill in the blank? Their microwave, unless they're trying to figure out how to set the clock, their refrigerator. I mean, in all sincerity, if you got a brochure from a water softener, how many people really would actually read that and look for any of this stuff? I mean,
I do.
but I mean, but you understand that most don't. I mean, you know, the people that stand out, you know, some people can look at a picture and paint it from memory, but they know most people can't do that. We're spending all this kind of time, and I think from a practical standpoint, is any of this going to make any difference to anyone?
Well, I very much see your point, Supervisor, because how often do people replace their furnaces? 15, 20 years?
Oh no, I live in a home that was built in '65 and it has the original furnace. So that would be once in their lifetime.
Okay.
And if they did, they would call a contractor, and that contractor would give them some pricing, maybe talk about capacity a little bit, and they would install it. And that would be it. I mean, no one reads that stuff.
No, that's a very important point, because like we've heard from some of the manufacturers, the contractor comes in, he'll sit at the table, he may give very limited options. He may say, based on your square footage, based on where the furnace is going to be located, this is the information. But you're right. How much of that information does the consumer take in, because they don't replace the unit once in a lifetime? So what we're trying to do is
like I would say, hey,
these
are more economical. These are your choices. You have capacity. You have you know, some conservation stuff. Here are the prices. You make a decision. I guess just the only point I'm trying to make is I don't know that most consumers A, see the item, and B, care beyond the basic, which is a one-liner that someone tells them. The idea that you'd be reading the booklet. Remember, when do you have the booklet? After it's installed. What difference does it make at that point? I mean, on the off chance you'll stumble across it at 3 in the morning with an insomnia case, and, you know, and you're deciding to read the guidebook for your furnace of all things, how would you benefit from this information? You don't read that stuff ahead of time. I mean, ultimately, our relationship is with the manufacturers and the installers. That, I guess my point is, I don't mean to beat anyone up. I think if there's any point to be made, it's with the manufacturers and the installers. The idea that the consumers are actively engaged in this, I think is probably not attached to reality.
And I think one of the elements, I mean, we're trying to figure out what's the best way to get the information out there. But that's going to be one of the beauties, I think, of our rebate program, is our contractors not only going to work with us so that we can use our social media to get information out there, but they have direct link to a lot of the distributors, all the manufacturers, and the contractors. So hopefully through that mechanism, we can get the information out there so that when they do buy a compliant product, they'll be able to apply for the rebate program and then buy the costs down. But I definitely understand, you know, how much is anybody going to look at it when they only replace it once in a lifetime?
Or could we accomplish more by just not worrying about the label? Maybe there's a better way to do it.
But I think it was the pleasure of the board to come back to the committee and the board with labeling. I mean, we discussed.
I remember the
discussion.
discussion.
This was discussed at the board.
Back here because the board told us to be back.
Right. No. But I mean, in fairness, you know, the board you've got. You know, I don't know how many installers we have and how many people read your guide. I get you were asked, and thank you. I mean, listen, your job is just to, you know, sort of follow the policy, but it's never too late to be smart. And are we jumping through a bunch of hurdles because someone on the fly said, you know, what about the labels? What about the labels? Is there really something we can accomplish by changing labels?
Okay, Sean, I've been in my house since 1965, and I did have to replace my furnace, and I did it just as you said. I called 3 contractors and asked them to give me bids on it. But if we could have that contractor be the point at which that information is given out, would be good. I don't know how we do that, but that's the key point for the consumer. You're right. I don't call up the manufacturer and say, what you got? You know, I call up the guy who's going to put it in my house and ask him, what's your price? What's the furnace? And then, you know, go from there. So, I mean, I think Sean's right that, you know, how many people are gonna look at this stuff, but if you call up 3 contractors, which I usually do, get 3 bids on anything, and sit down with them and talk over what it is they're gonna sell me, what they've got, that may be the best point at which you can get that information out. So, but you mentioned distributors and contractors, so.
Yeah, they will be part of our outreach through our contractor, EGIA, and they have a good link to all of those, so, you know, they'll be able to do that, and then we'll use our own resources, not only for what we're doing here, but also to reach out to the EJ communities. If there are communities that are gonna be, you know, folks that are out there, and a lot of those homes are older and they need to replace a furnace, it'd be great for them to also know about the rebate program.
I think the intent is to make the information as widely available as possible so that whoever wants to read a booklet or whoever goes on the web or whoever talks to their contractor, the means is available. Yeah, or opens a closet. Phil, I think you had something else.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge, we understand this is a difficult problem to reach the consumer. We know this is not going to be 100% effective. I don't know if it's going to be 50% effective or 10% effective, but there are people who will ask for the brochure before they buy it, or will go down and buy their own unit and do the self-help. And we're not going to reach everybody with the labeling. Mayor Mitchell, your point about the point of sale, which is where the contractor sits at the table with the homeowner, that's the proper point. We struggle with how we can insert ourselves in there in terms of enforcement. There's not much we can do in that conversation. The best we could do is have the contractors know about this, and hopefully they relay the information. And if there is some labeling and other material, that could help that process as well.
So, you know, I've been here about 8 years. We don't get the guy at the gas station engaged with the person at the pump to explain that they're about to pour the cleanest gasoline in the United States. We go to the manufacturer. So maybe the answer is to limit the availability of non-compliant products, perhaps. Or if you charge a fee, then maybe that's mission accomplished. That's the mitigation fee. And, you know, we help buy down rebates for other people that don't get the non-compliant stuff. But I guess what I'm struggling with is, where is this belief that this agency, when it comes to consumer products, has to get an eye-to-eye with the consumer? Non-compliant paint? Where's the relationship there? That's not how we solve this. We don't get involved with the guy at the hardware store. We just go around and eliminate the old paint. We used to go around and do that very heavy-handedly, but the bottom line is, we phase out the old and we phase in the new. What is this thing that we need to get a face-to-face with the consumer? And do the people read the labels of the paint? Maybe. I mean, I understand who I'm talking to. There's some weird people in this room. But most people, chemists and scientists, but I mean, most people don't know the VOC of their paint. They don't want to know the VOC of the paint, and they don't care.
They just know it doesn't smell good.
Bingo. But they go to the counter, and that guy doesn't either. Our agency deals with the manufacturer, and the supply of the product is how we manage this. Isn't that the better way to do this,
Well,
based on our experience?
And yes, sir, I mean, your points will take, please.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, we can have this debate as long as we like, but the direction of the board to staff was pretty clear. And so that's what we're trying to do, respond to is the direction of the board. Supervisor, your points are well taken. We agree with a lot of those points. But the fact of the matter is, this is what we were asked to do. So I know what you said in terms of it's always a good time to be smart. We like to be smart. We also like to perform the duties that we're tasked with doing.
And you're presenting to the committee, and one of the committee members would be happy to move that we chum this effort and move on to a more intelligent way to use our resources and not get spun up into wasting time with labels, despite the ask.
I understand. We'll defer to the chair for the motion.
Well, it's a non-motion item, is what I read on the agenda, right? So
That's
I don't know that I have the prerogative to stop it at this point.
You're probably right about that.
Chair.
Because the board voted on this.
Right.
We can go back and forth, you know, do
If
the
I may,
ping-pong thing.
Mr. Chair, we do have some of the manufacturers here
Right.
that can speak to your comments and the staff proposal. I do want to highlight just really quickly that Rheem has certified 2 more model lines that they have. So they now have, for standard furnaces, 3 model lines that are going to go through 7 brands. Goodman has high efficiency brands, has 3 model lines that will go through 3 brands. Lennox has not only standard but high efficiency. They've certified 3 model lines for standard and 4 for high efficiency. So the products are coming around. Of course, we extended the mitigation fee to give the manufacturers a little bit more time to get those products commercially available, let them get through all their safety testing. So progress is definitely being made. I just have one more slide about the rebate program, if I may. If we can bring that back up. As I mentioned, we initiated our contract with Electric and Gas Industry Association, EGIA, back on May 4th. We do have, as you can see here, we do have our logo for the program. Through the contractor, we've already established a toll-free number, an email. We have the www.cleanairfurnacerebate.com website secured. We do have, EGIA is also working through, so they have all the bank accounts and everything necessary for cutting the rebate checks, so there's a lot of progress that's made there. The dashboard that they're going to be developing is really mainly for us, so that we can go in and we can tell in real time how much money is being made out. So if it looks like this program is getting a lot of success, we have the ability to come back to this committee and then go back to the board to secure some additional funding. They'll be working with the contractors and the manufacturers and distributors to develop promotional material. So I think we're really on a good road to do this. We're looking at a mid-June launch, and if this committee would like, we could come back and provide a little bit more information at the June Stationary Source Committee, or report back later once we know that the program is up and running, to kind of give some feedback. So with that, Mr. Chair, would be, with the board's blessing, setting a hearing in June for a public hearing in July to add these labeling provisions and directions for manufacturers. So with that, Mr. Chair.
With that, we're going to take public comment this time. Thank you, Ron. Grab a chair for you. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll be passing these. So these are, there you go. Thank you. My name is Rusty Tharp. It's good to be back. See you all again. I represent Goodman Manufacturing. I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs. So I'm not going to read through this per se. I just want to make 3 comments. First, actually, I like the conversation so far. First of all, we do support, Goodman supports the rebate, and we do ask that support any additional funding for rebates in this district. Second of all, as the discussion has been, we say that.
Did you say squat?
I'm sorry, I did. South Coast Air Quality Music.
I was surprised you were.
Wow.
We're just like.
So,
Yeah.
my apologies for the district.
But sure.
Squat rebate, that's a good one. John, you can use that.
I don't use acronyms or code sections.
Oh,
Really?
Larry,
I'm now-
No, I don't do it.
So anyway,
It's travel work.
we support the
People know what we're talking
conversation that the label really doesn't do any good, and I think, so the intent here is to provide some information that might be helpful for the board members to understand that it's really not beneficial to do a label on the product itself. If you look on page 3, there's a chart of the typical distribution cycle for a replacement market. If you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer those, but if not, I'll move on. The next following 5 pages are different Home Depot, pictures of different Home Depots and Lowe's in the district that we have visited and taken pictures of the displays. And the thing that I want to point out is that every single one of them basically says that they'll set you up with an in-home consultation. So if a consumer goes to Home Depot or Lowe's and is interested in a HVAC product, then basically Home Depot or Lowe's sends a contractor out to your house. So all these purchases are basically, as we have stated, are done at the kitchen table. And the product is practically never seen by the consumer prior to installation. So if our goal is to try to get the consumer informed on what they're buying is compliant or non-compliant, we need to tell them up front. And I would say that for those consumers who would be looking at the label on the product, those are the same consumers who are going to go look at the literature. So I would suggest that the addition of a label on the product isn't going to buy anything at all.
But labeling of the literature, we're okay with?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So we don't mind putting the, quite frankly, it's all electronic today.
Right, it's a lot easier,
So
right?
it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to do, and we don't have a issue with inventory at one location going to another location and in between the districts. So we strongly suggest, our opinion is that it really belongs on the literature. And the last thing is we are okay with the literature information and the website.
Yeah, but we'd have board members that feel better if you have to go to all the trouble of putting labels on everything.
I understand, so I'd be happy to do whatever I can to help convince them that there's a better approach.
And Supervisor, what we can do as we go back to the full board is obviously talk about the things that have come up, but we could also talk about additional information that was obtained through the committee, through some of the other input that I'm sure we're going to hear, and say that the board may want to reconsider that particular portion if so desires, or limit it to sort of what we've just heard.
Yeah, I think it's a strong recommendation from this body, if that's what we all feel comfortable making. We'll go with that. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you, sir.
We got a few more comments to go through. Next. Come on. Come on down.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am Dr. Dave Stevens, work with Johnson Controls, Director of Regulatory Affairs. A few handwritten notes that I want to go over real quickly. First of all, what was said a moment ago about the labeling, hallelujah. And I take this personally as I come from Oklahoma, and we had the dubious honor of the last several days of having air quality alerts. So we've entered this dubious fellowship that we too have.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Had it not been such a dramatic shift, I probably wouldn't even bring it up, but it was new.
Oh, wow.
So we have personal
Of
ownership.
course, yours
now
was
in
from
this system.
burning the remnants of the crop harvest.
Yeah.
Other than that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what they used to call low-hanging fruit out here, right?
On the rebate, we, in general, we support the rebate, but we echo Rusty's comments. We're offering for the first 6,000 people a $500 rebate. If your market is 100 to 150,000 people, that's a drop in the bucket. If you really want to incentivize people, it needs to go more than that 6,000. I would hardly encourage you, as Rusty said, I agree with him, you need to encourage that pool somehow. I realize the budgets are tight and I realize the issues, but what's our end objective here? That's what we have to consider. In terms of the labels, again, I wholeheartedly agree, and I would put forth the thought that whenever I, as a contractor, I come in and I say, oh, by the way, on this line item, you have a mitigation fee. Would not this person, or would that not be the message, and what value does the label add whenever the high probability they will never see it? But when I write that check for another $200, $300, I know that this is a non-compliant unit, and I will consider options, particularly if I have an increased rebate opportunity. So the third item I have, and to me it addresses labeling, but it's a tangent, is that we are being required to label propane when we don't know what these things are when they leave what we have. I mean, we're supposed to say this is going to be a propane furnace when you don't know till you get to the installation. Again, this goes back to understanding of the logistics and supply chain. You look like you have a question.
Well, you don't know whether it's gonna be fueled by propane.
That is correct.
The furnace goes out of the manufacturing.
That's
it's-
correct.
It's going
But
to
again, that's
somebody.
another one of the labels. To me, it falls in the same bucket. When it leaves the factory, we do not know how it's going to be
That's gonna be
fueled.
fueled, yeah.
And until it hits that installation point, you will not know.
So when you guys supply the furnace, it doesn't have the orifices already installed?
It's a conversion kit you put in for someone on current furnaces.
For most of them are shipping LP and it's a conversion to go to propane.
It's shipped natural gas.
Yes.
Converted, yes, that's correct.
So, you have a
And then,
response to that?
Well, during this interim period until the limits actually kick in, there is this opportunity where they can sell the higher emitting, like 40 nanograms per joule NOx limit furnaces where they can have this propane kit. They are sold separately. It's not that they're packaged together. They could be, but in general, they're separate. But once after the limit fully kicks in terms of when the furnaces are being provided that meet the 14 nanograms per joule, the labeling is going to be even more important because they could actually still ship in a 40 nanogram per joule furnace, but then they could convert it to LPG. So because LPG is not covered under this rule, it focuses on the natural gas. So we have an interim period until the final compliance stage for 14 nanograms per joule. And so it's, in some ways, it could be a little bit tricky, but after that, it's gonna be more clear cut, because nobody's gonna be bringing in the 40 nanogram per joule furnace, except solely for the purpose of conversion programs.
And that's the limited period where we're gonna have this issue.
Right, for the, during
Got
this
it.
mitigation fee period.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi, I'm Dave Winningham with Linux International. This has kind of been a long haul for all of us, and
We thought we were near the end.
we thought we were near the end. Well, we thought we were near the end last November too, but when we introduced the first product. But we have continued to expand our portfolio and have a complement of products that are available to the consumer today with inventory on the ground. So the rebate program is critical to that. Obviously, the movement of product up to this point hasn't been up to our expectations, because we thought we were going to get going on this a little bit. But the extension, the expansion of the rebate program is critical to ensure that we are moving toward favor and compliant products. In regard to the labeling, it's a tough proposition. Regardless of which direction you take, there is a significant opportunity the consumer may or may not be informed. But I think a simple mechanism that doesn't unduly burden manufacturers, because even small changes do cost money. We are not heavily vested one way or the other here, and we will do whatever we have to do to comply. But I think getting the rebate program appropriately funded and not having gaps there is a critical thing from our perspective. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ryan Tichenor, Product Manager for Rig Manufacturing. Two things. First would be just kind of the practicality of putting these labels on. We're going through Prop 65 stuff right now. We had distributors send, because we put it on, like we did on all products, we had them send products back from Connecticut and Wisconsin because they had cancer labels on them. Yeah, they're like, what's this? Sorry, I have nothing to do with you guys, but it's still here. So putting it on the website and things, it causes confusion. It would be easiest to scrap the whole thing for simplicity's sake. We already put labels on, it's really no big deal to change what we put on there. But yeah, it does cause concern and has little benefits. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the rebate program. As I said, with the funding, I'm in the middle of creating marketing campaigns, working with third parties, setting up training and distributor events. So we're really concerned about being able to talk to that rebate amount or what it's going to be. If it's not funded through the whole year or whatever, then it's tough for us to speak to, and that's where we invest the most and educate the most. So if we're fully aware of that rebate, we're going to push it more. It's going to do better.
Thanks, Ryan.
Anyone else? Once, twice? Wayne, I think I recognize the rebates aren't on the agenda today, right?
That's right.
No.
We're done with that.
And I want to say we had a long discussion about the fact that that funding was hoping to be backfilled by the mitigation fee, and that 6,000 number is, that's just how much we funded, but there's more money coming.
That's the intent.
That's the intent.
Yes.
Do you know how that's working in the field, or do we have a one sheet on that yet? Sort of, hopefully we can show the manufacturer, look, there's money coming in now. It's not just the $3 million, and here's how that's going to fund, or any
Well, the
information we can give the manufacturers, give them a little bit more reassurance that that money's not running out.
Yeah. Well, we do, like I said, we do have the first $3 million, but we have yet to receive that incremental amount. We're not going to receive that for probably another 4 months or so, October.
Okay.
And then once we get that in, then we'll have a better idea of what that incremental amount is going to be that we can then fund back into the program. And then we can project that on the other compliance cycles for the standard units versus the high efficiency.
We won't know that until October.
Right. That's when the fees are,
But
mitigation fees.
there may be other funding sources before October. So if the 6,000 happen really quickly within a month or two, we could quickly come back to the board and try to identify additional funds and try to do that. It's hard for us to put literature out because it's a board decision at the end of the day to allocate those funds, but there are some ways we can move it faster.
Not only is is EGIA as a contractor going to be able to, as part of their dashboard, it'll be real time because everything's being done electronically. We can also work with the manufacturers that if they see a lot of boxes are moving, that can be another indicator that we should be moving more quickly to find additional funding for the program. And then we can bring it back to this committee.
We'll try and make sure we bring it back before it runs out of money, so we don't have that problem.
Yes, sir. You got it.
All right, back to the labeling question. Any further comments, Sean, Judy?
No, I think we raised some interesting points. So the point of sale is the critical point. So, you know, but we're not going to reach every consumer. There's just going to be some people that don't care or aren't interested. So I think we do what we can to inform people that they're going to pay a mitigation fee, or they can buy a furnace where they get a rebate. So.
But I think the question that I have is, when we send this back to the board, we want to send it with a recommendation that maybe we don't need the label on the units, which has an increased cost for the manufacturer, and really has a very limited reach of actually informing the consumer, other than the guy that opens the closet up 5 years from now and looks at it.
And so we just have it on the brochure or on the websites,
Right.
and not require a label on the box.
I just want to mention there is a current labeling requirement for the box.
That's what I thought, there is current
Right,
requirement.
and
that
we
it's
were
on
just
the box.
proposing to maybe change it slightly. We use that for enforcement purposes if our area source compliance staff
Yeah.
goes to distributors just to make sure everything's.
And that's
So maybe
probably
leave it there, but
needed.
not on the unit.
Yeah, and that
Leave
was
it
the
on the
point
box.
that I
Yeah.
was trying to make, is I understand everybody's objective, it just doesn't sound like the evidence supports that it moves the needle to add anything more to the labeling requirement. And maybe there's just some better ways to spend our energy.
I think that's definitely something I would agree with, in sending that recommendation back to the full body when we hear this,
Just that we have a reconsideration of the labeling.
on the units.
And then we
But
can
it stays on
provide,
the box.
Right.
Mr.
Staff
Chair?
knows that. Sure, Ms. Lees.
Chair?
Supervisor?
Yeah, I just want to ask our council if there's any legal implications for not allowing for the labeling. I mean, are we required to have labeling? Can you kind of walk me through that? Do we have any laws that would prevent us from moving in another direction?
In terms of changing the label that we already have on the box?
Well, if we were to not do labeling, does that put us in crosshairs with current law?
I don't believe so, unless, obviously if our rule says we need to do it, then we could change that, but I'm not aware of
Supervisor, we're talking about leaving the labeling on the box, or leaving
As is.
As is, or maybe modifying it slightly. But the labeling that is also required in the rules that's presented right now is to have a label on each unit. And what we're understanding is no one's going to be looking at the unit ahead of time, other than the people that might crawl in their attic or look in the closet later on. They're not going to know. So that's the label we're talking, that the manufacturers are saying, we probably don't need that. And then also it's a cost burden for them to put that on there.
Right, and I just wanted clarification if there's no legal requirement for us. If we're just trying to be more preventive and giving consumers information, okay, I understand that, and we don't have any legal implications there, then fine. And that's what you're telling me, right, County Council, or Council, not County
Yes.
Council, Council.
I understand that there is a legal sort of element here, and that is if we don't put it on the box, we may not be able to enforce the rule. You've got to notify somebody there is a rule before you can say, hey, you broke the rule. So, but we want to notify the consumer in other ways too, so.
But I think we're all in agreement, we leave it on the box. I don't think anyone's having any heartburn over that, since we're already there anyways. All right, staff have enough direction on that? And
yes.
okay.
When we present this, we will note that there was a lot of discussion on the requirements and the effectiveness of labeling on the unit. And we could say it's the pleasure of the board to,
This committee.
of the committee.
Yeah, just this committee.
Well,
The committee can make a recommendation.
Yeah,
right,
well,
it'll be the pleasure of the board whether or not to remove that as a
Yeah,
board.
whether or not,
So we're not gonna do
whether or
that.
not to follow our direction.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay, that took a long time.
So we had time. Don't go there.
All right, item number 2, status of the permit backlog. Lucky, tell us how good we're doing.
So we want to share some good news with you.
Can I give you a drum roll?
So, as you know, we have been working on the permit backlog reduction for the last couple of years, and we had established quarterly targets for ourselves. We managed to exceed, each and every quarter those targets. And guess what? Last week, for the first time, we managed to cross the 50% reduction target. We are at 101%, and this is how it looks like. So the dotted line is our 50% reduction target, and yes, last week we were at 51%. We are not declaring victory yet because we want to make sure that those trends are permanent.
Still another 50.
But we are ahead of time and under target, and we are going to be giving you a much fuller presentation at the board meeting in June. But we just want to share the good news with you folks, and we'll continue.
What's the ultimate goal? What's the best management practice for an agency like ours? There's always an exception.
Yes.
So
Yes.
setting aside the rare exception that, hey, there's a reason this can't be done that way. What should our backlog look like if we ran the best we could run?
Pretty close to this.
That's pretty close to this. This is basically our sweet spot. There are a few spots still available that we can eliminate perhaps. We call them the old dogs. Very hard to get rid of, but nevertheless, we are pretty much on our sweet spot. There's pretty much the backlog is gone, and this is the working inventory that we have to work with. Just like any other business, we gotta have working inventory so that the engineers don't basically waiting, idle, on their desk, for the applications to come in, permit applications to come in. So this is a sweet spot, and it's by far the best record in the last 30 years, by far, not even close. The best. Well, actually, the credit goes, to staff, working extremely hard. But anyhow, we'll have a much fuller presentation to you folks at the June meeting. But we got excited, want to share the good news with you.
Well, that is good news. So, if I may, Mr. Chair, so we are going to have our public relations people send out a press release and offer up Lackey or Wayne or somebody, to the press to explain that we're at a milestone we haven't been at in 30 years because we're trying to serve the public and make this agency friendly. I mean, we need to celebrate our victories, and this is, this was the right thing to do. We had a good reason to do it, but we also did it, and people should know. I mean, it's nice to hear that a, government agency looked in the mirror and decided they were just going to do things better.
And we did it 5 months ahead of time.
We did. It was October 2016 when we presented the action plan to the board, and so, yeah.
That's a great suggestion.
I remember when we started
And yes,
this,
we will.
that certain kinds of permits, and it may have been permits for construction,
Yes.
we know those are going to take a long time.
Yes.
So maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit for me.
Sure. Typically, let's say you're at a power plant and you're seeking a permit. Because we are working very closely and our processes are intertwined with the Energy Commission processes, it takes multiple years to get a permit, and even more years or so to actually construct the plant. So normally those take 5 to 7 years to go through full completion. If you are a refinery, for instance, and it's a big project, it will trigger, let's say, a CEQA review. Or just to prepare the CEQA document, it will take anything from 6 months to a few years. We work with Tesoro at the Larry project for more than 3 years. So these are the typical things, typically the type of applications that will take a lot longer. But we are making good progress in accelerating the processing with the rest of the permits. And we are also developing online automated tools that I'll probably allude to those at my presentation in June. And we are making excellent progress on those as well. And we are working with the Small Business Alliance and other interested parties. So you'll see, we'll be pleased with the progress that we are making on that front too.
What about the permit to
So all the figures that I was showing you
Mhm.
at the last slide, we are throwing everything that you can find in the kitchen sink, everything that we have in our inventory. If you exclude the permits to construct that have already been issued, which serve as temporary permits to operate, so there is no sense of urgency. Actually, the 3,600 figure that I showed you in the last column goes down to 2,500.
Wow.
And we started tracking things that way, and we are displaying that information on our public websites both ways, so that the public understands that actually we look a lot better than that slide suggests.
And can you explain the difference in terms of the timeframe?
Oh, the time frame. So what happens is, once the applicant gets his permits to construct, they have up to a year to construct the facility. They can ask for extensions if it takes a little longer, and we'll offer annual extensions, 1 or 2. But we are totally dependent on the applicant in terms of how quickly he or she installs the equipment.
Sure.
And once they install, they test their equipment, they send those test results to us, and it demonstrates that they're compliant with our rules and regs, then we issue the permit to operate. So that's why we want to track those a little bit differently.
So at that point, you guys are done, but we're just waiting for them to get back to us.
Right, exactly. Now, what we have done, and what has helped us as part of this process was, where possible, we try to collapse and consolidate the two-step process into one. And rather than going permit to construct first and then wait for the permit to operate, we try to collapse those and just issue the permit to operate from the get-go. We can do it with respect to some easy operations,
Sure.
Not necessarily with refineries and others. But that has helped quite a bit, and we are going to be formalizing that policy. We have been informally implementing it, but it has helped quite a bit in streamlining the process, among other things.
Yeah, one of the things that brought this to my attention early on was an operator that was coming to the city of Temecula, and it was, I believe, a brewery, and there were a whole bunch of equipment they needed, but they needed a permit from us.
Yes.
And they just couldn't get the questions fast enough to find out if the issue and make that move, and then just went back to SCAQMD because it would just be too much of a headache.
Okay.
I imagine things like that are not taking quite as long anymore, and hopefully the return time on those types of questions are, now that we're a little more freed up from the backlog,
Yeah.
hopefully we can focus on those things as well.
Supervisor was instrumental in pushing us towards generating that multicolored bar chart that shows the age of the city permits. And what you're going to see there, a reduction in every single color, including the green one, the fresh applications, which means the applications are getting out of the door a lot faster now.
Right.
So I'll be happy to talk to these guys. We love to see new businesses coming in and try to help them as much as they can. Please.
Unfortunately, they're happy down in Escondido, and they're probably not coming back to Temecula anytime soon. But that was, I want to say, 5 years ago when I had that conversation. That's really sort of the daylight for me. We have a permit problem. But I'm happy to see that now we can take those opportunities when they come up and solve that problem ahead of time.
Do you have the statistics on length of time to get a permit from application to issuance? I mean, obviously it's different depending on what it is, but.
It will be all over the map depending on the application type, but we are trying to stay below the 180-day threshold. Oh, one thing that I didn't mention, it's not a full presentation, as part of our automation and customer service and transparency improvement efforts, we are creating a new dashboard that will give the applicant an opportunity to go in and figure out the status of their application. Of the individual steps, how long it took, if the permit is stuck, why is it stuck? Is it, are we waiting for information from them? Are they waiting from us? We are making great progress. In fact, we are going to have the internal tool for experimentation as early as early June, and perhaps we'll have a public version of it by tail end of summer, early fall, and it will improve transparency tremendously. For both, for the applicants, but also internally, for our staff, for our supervisors, for our managers, to keep everyone honest and working.
Right.
Moving.
I think it's also important to point out, this wasn't just a lot of overtime and throwing people at the job. This involved a lot of institutional changes,
Absolutely.
a lot of policy revisions?
Yes.
And maybe, Lucky, sort of speak to that and how that's going to affect us moving forward.
Absolutely. It's a multi-dimensional effort. True, we reduced our vacancy rates. Yes, we brought them in on a voluntary basis to work during the weekends. But it was the institutional changes that we started introducing, namely policy consultants that streamlining the permitting, standardizing the permit conditions, recognizing good performance for the first time, and patting people in the back. And we essentially established the pillars that will institute continuous improvement and create a culture of excellence, frankly. You know, we are not going to be satisfied with the status quo. We are happy where we are right now, but we want to be even better by next year. So there are things like that that actually have propelled us, and we are kind of optimistic about the future, even though there are some clouds, you know, the reclaim transition. We know that we are going to take a hit, okay? There's fatigue, you know, there are other things, but we are more optimistic than ever based on what we have accomplished thus far. Did I answer?
Great job, Lucky, great job.
Any other questions, board members?
Just a quick question. If you could touch on what industry sectors are being transitioned later, just so I know. What other industry sectors will be coming online later, the tougher ones?
So reclaim?
What are you referring to, the new automation tools, online tools that we are developing?
No. Industry sectors that are going to be coming.
Industry sectors.
So it's under the reclaim.
Oh, okay. I think you were referring to perhaps the reclaim transition?
You said refineries?
Yes.
You said
They are
refineries?
predominantly the refineries. They're predominantly the refineries, the power plants, a lot of metallurgical facilities. Did I say power plants? Yes, I did. So these are the big guns. And then you have a lot more smaller facilities. There are roughly 260 facilities that will be transitioning out of that program.
Can you elaborate on sort of what we do now for a refinery under reclaim, and then what the difference will be when the refineries are coming in?
Sure. So under the current reclaim program, each facility has an emission allocation, so an emission budget that they have to live with. And there is a lot of flexibility within the facility fence line for the operator to decide where and when to install their controls and how to install, what type of controls to install. As we are transitioning out of reclaim, the facilities or the operator will be subject to certain command and control rules, and they'll have to meet certain limitations for each and every aspect of their processes. So some of that flexibility is going to be taken away, and they'll have to meet certain standards by a date certain. The two programs are meant to produce equivalent environmental benefits, but we'll be going through that transition between now and, what is it, 2023, the latest? Or
rules by next year.
yes.
So if you looked at it from a permit number.
So so we have 262 reclaim permits that are operating 2,400 approximately equipment. So we'll still try to maintain the facility permit structure so that we don't get inundated with additional equipment-specific permits. And we should be able to do that with larger facilities that are subject to our Title V program because they're obligated under the federal regs to retain that facility permit structure. But the smaller guys, there is a likelihood that they may ask the disintegration of their facility permit into the individual equipment-specific permit. My crystal ball is not very clear. I don't know what fraction of them they're going to ask for it, but we'll be prepared. You know, they want to stay with the facility permit, we'll maintain it. They want to go with individual equipment-specific permit, we'll be ready to address that as well.
Very good. Any public comment on this item? Okay. All right, board members, we have our written reports attached. If anyone has any questions on those. If not, we have any other business from our board members? Any public comment on items not on the agenda? Come on, we need something to do for the next 40 minutes, right? All right, our next meeting was June 15th. Thank you all. We'll go ahead and go to adjournment.
It doesn't happen too often.